reverse engineering, forensics, web penetration testing, cryptography, network, accumulated technology from mainframes to Web 2, Web 3, Active Directory services, identity and access management services, cryptography, protocols, algorithms. When you start capture the flags, you face a lot of technical challenges. If your first reaction and your last is to quit, then you're probably not made for this field.
Do you think in future CTFs can be integrated with bug bounty?
People from Hack the Box approached me a few years ago. When we're talking about Active Directory, we are usually referring to a subset of services called Active Directory domain services.
Are there any specific tools through which we can use pen testing on Active Directory? Are there any red teaming, blue and purple team? So how does these teams collaborate with each other within the organization? Hello everyone, welcome to Learn Knowledge with Rabbi Jamura, episode 9. In this episode, we'll be having a conversation with Charlie Bromberg, who's a cybersecurity professional and a speaker for more than 25 conferences across the globe. He's also a creator of HackerRecipes and Exegol. So we'll be discussing more about this in the further podcast. So without any delay, let's welcome Charlie. Welcome to the podcast, Charlie.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So before getting into CTFs, vulnerabilities, hacking and concept stuff, so can you please share about how did your journey started in cybersecurity?
Sure. Well, I had one thing for me, a chance I had is I knew at the beginning I wanted to deal with cybersecurity later on. So I steered into engineering school, and in the engineering school I did so in the north of France in telecom and signal treatment. I made an internship where I was introduced to the cybersecurity field and introduced to capture the flags. That's where it started a few years ago in 2017, if I remember correctly. And it started there. I made a new internship at another company, and that's where I really started working into the penetration testing industry. And since then, I did some conferences, some talks, some capture the flags, and that's really where it all started around 2017, 2018. First with an internship, then with capture the flags, and then with a full-time.
Thanks for sharing with Charlie. And most of the people think that cybersecurity is like hacking, like how can we hack, iPhones, maybe Wi-Fi and so on. So before going into, like a professional hacker, I think, as you mentioned, the starting stage is CTFs, catch the flag. So what do you think about it, Charlie?
In my opinion, the capture the flags are a really good way to know if you really want to do that, because I met a lot of people that wanted to get into the cybersecurity industry for wrong reasons probably, or for right reasons. I'm not anyone to judge. The only thing is they thought they wanted to get into that field. In fact, they really didn't. They thought that because of movies, because of TV series, because of a mystery around that field. And the reality behind is that you have to deal with frustration. You have to deal with highly technical stuff. You have to deal with English. And in my case, it's not my native language. So sometimes it could be a bit difficult to read all day long in English, to write all day long in English. So there are a lot of challenges. And if you don't want to deal with challenges on your day-to-day basis, that's a huge stumbling block. And capture the flags are a really good way to test that and to know if that's what you want to do. Because when you start capture the flags, you face a lot of technical challenges. If your first reaction and your last is to quit, then you're probably not made for this field, because that's basically what you will do on a day-to-day basis. So that's the first thing, to know for sure if that's something you want to do or not. And the other thing is the capture the flags, while they are not 100% realistic and representative of what you're going to do technically, they're still a really good way to train yourself, to show your skills, to compare with others, to meet with people and companies as well. And to many capture the flags I know, there are companies going there either as a sponsor or for recruitment purposes. So that's a really good way to get yourself into the community and get to meet people that are doing this job, are starting it, are doing it for tens of years, and meet companies that could potentially hire you or guide you into this field.
Great. So are there any specific CTF competitions that are going across the globe?
So usually many people know DEF CON. It's probably the most known security event in the world. But my personal take on that is it costs a lot. And if you don't live in the US, it's probably not worth it in the beginning. There are many, many capture the flags online. So it doesn't cost a thing to travel there. And that's probably the first way to get into capture the flags. You also have online platforms where you can train all day long. You have no limit. They are either free or paid or hybrid, and you can have maybe RootMe, HackTheBox, TryHackMe, and many other platforms. Some platforms are sometimes specialized into a field like reverse engineering or cryptography. That's for you to decide. And then physically, IRL, there are many capture the flags that exist. Sometimes they are organized by schools, by universities, or by companies, or by associations. You can go to that. I mainly know capture the flags in France, but sometimes you can go to B-Sides. I don't know if B-Sides does CTF, but there are a lot of B-Sides all around the world. And then you just need to maybe go on online platforms and meet people from where you live and ask for capture the flags in that area, or maybe look on the internet, look on CTF time, country into an input, and try to find the IRL CTFs. But IRL is not the only way to go. There's also the online way to go.
Good information, Charlie. And also, you mentioned about different types of CTFs, right? Like reverse engineering, cryptography.
There are many types of challenges that you can do, from reverse engineering, forensics, web, penetration testing, cryptography, network, and steganography, many fields, many types. If you are a beginner into the whole cybersecurity field, the best category is probably the one where you feel most confident, because that's where you're going to start facing challenges, where you're going to start training yourself. Then I advise to quickly move on to categories that companies are looking for. So it could be web, could be networking, could be dev, could be sometimes reverse engineering, crypto, penetration testing, of course, because when you are applying for a junior role as, let's say, penetration tester, the company may not expect high technical skills from you, but if your technical profile on the online platforms that you are training on are mainly focused on steganography and fields that are not really relevant to the day-to-day job that you're going to do, you're missing something probably. So yeah, my point, start with something that you like and then quickly move on to something that's going to be useful for your day-to-day basis, for your daily.
Is there any ethical guidelines?
Sure. Well, the ethical guidelines are the same as any other field, of course. If you find vulnerabilities, flaws, one must not exploit them for its own personal gain or financial gain, of course. But one thing I wanted to share about that, especially, is if you find a way to do a denial of service on a legitimate business, for example, people will look at you as a script kiddie, as someone who is with really low morals. If you really want to be recognized into the field, if you want to prove you're good, do it in capture the flags. That's the way to go. Do it into your daily job. Do it sharing what you know by contributing to the community. There are many ways to prove your technical skills, and doing a DOS on a hospital is not one of them.
True. And even whenever you're doing CTFs, there are like certain rules, right? For example, you can only perform these two
Sure.
vulnerabilities, maybe cross-site scripting or maybe SQL injection, but you cannot perform DDoS.
Yeah, exactly. I've been doing penetration testing for 6 years, I think. I've never done an intentional denial of service even once, because that's never been asked of me. There are jobs where you can do that. I don't know the word in English, but it's load testing, probably, something like that, where
Payload.
your job is, yeah, it's basically to find out if the platform you're testing is made for that kind of traffic. If you're doing penetration testing, usually the denial of service is really low level, and it's something that we don't test because that's not what we look for. We look for logical flaws. We look for misconfigurations. There could be misconfigurations that lead to denial of service, of course, and we will try to find it, but we will never try to exploit it, because we usually test on production environments, and doing a denial service on your client on purpose is not the way to go. And to go back onto the capture the flag thing, there are rules, of course. There are many types of capture the flags. Two main ones, which are Jeopardy and Attack Defense. In the Jeopardy one, the rules is you don't attack the other teams and you don't attack the platform. You only attack the challenges that were made to be attacked. If you trespass those rules, some capture the flag may ban you. And I've seen in the past some teams that were also building kind of a hall of shame, just point out the bad ones. And in the attack defense one, you usually have teams that are facing each other and where they are given the exact same environment. And at the same time, they must defend their own environment and fix the issues, but also attack the other team's environments. But this doesn't mean that you have the right to attack the other team's laptops, for example. You only have the right to attack the environment that was given for this capture the flag. So bear in mind to always respect the rules, because if you don't, that will be a good indicator to your future recruiter that if you didn't respect the rules into a capture the flag, you probably will not respect the rules in a professional setup.
True. And as you mentioned about attack and defense, I think the team will be segregating into two parts, right? Like maybe if it is 10, I think 5 will be doing attacks and the 5 will be doing defense. So this will be continuously.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it depends on the team. Some want to do defense only, some want to do red teaming only, offense only, and some prefer to do both, because when they attack the other team's environment, they find the vulnerability and they are most likely able to find out the fix and do it themselves. So it really depends on teams and on the individuals on that team, on what they like, on what they are used to do. But of course, when you find a vulnerability, if you know how to fix it, you'll probably be more efficient than someone that is just trying to fix all things and doesn't really know what the vulnerabilities are. That's the whole point of doing penetration testing, finding vulnerabilities to advise on mitigations. If you are doing the pen test and know how to do good configurations, hardening, go for it.
Got it. And do you think there will be any future trends in CTFs?
Yeah, there is one trend in the past. I've seen in the past years is first one is IoT, Internet of Things, embedded systems. It's not brand new, but I've seen more and more capture the flags implement that. Also, there is OSINT, open source intelligence.
Yeah.
There are many capture the flags that have a whole section now where usually you have a mix, a lot of OSINT and sometimes a little bit of social engineering as well, where they have set up a fake phone or a fake email address and you have to do some social engineering to get past the defenses or find out some information or make them do some action. And there is also everything regarding Web3, blockchain. I've seen that find its way into many capture the flags in the past 2 years or something. It's getting more and more its own categories. In the past, it was in the web category, but it's so special since it's really all about blockchain and smart contracts. People are doing its own category now. And then apart from those trends, there is also one meta trend, let's say, that I see coming is society is accumulating a lot of technology and the speed at which we are accepting new technology is greater than depreciation speed. What it means is in the past 40 to 60 years, we've accumulated technology from mainframes to Web 2, Web 3, Active Directory services, identity and access management services, cryptography, protocols, algorithms, whatever. We've been accumulating them, and it's getting more and more difficult to find people that know how to do everything. Companies nowadays want to build a team that has some individuals that are specialized on a field or a set of fields. And the sum of those individuals makes for a great team. And in Capture the Flags, we can see CTFs that have more and more categories and more diversity, technical diversity. So a trend that I see staying for the future years and decades is that increase in diversity. In my opinion, it would be getting even more and more diverse because we're still accumulating things.
True, I agree. And since you mentioned about blockchain and smart contracts, if we talk about blockchain, it's much more difficult to find vulnerabilities, right?
It depends, because it is its own category. I'm not an expert into blockchain, so I'm not going to the details of that. But like everything else, it requires training. It requires knowledge of the basic principles. What is a blockchain? What is a smart contract? how Web3 differentiates from Web2, what could be the flaws, but there are flaws. We've seen it with many blockchains in the past, and in Capture the Flags, organizers sometimes either rely on existing blockchains and create challenges that do not exploit vulnerabilities of the blockchain itself, but how it is implemented. And some other Capture the Flags sometimes create a whole new blockchain or protocol with intended flaws in it. So it's that more difficult than Web 2, or it's just different. It's just another category. That's it.
And do you think in future, like CTFs can be integrated with bug bounties? In CTFs, we already know that there are some vulnerabilities, right? Whereas in bug bounty programs, we are unsure about it, and we have to find where exactly the vulnerability is.
It's an interesting question. It's hard, in my opinion, to implement bug bounties in Capture the Flags because the principle of it, as you said, is really different. In the Capture the Flags, you build a challenge with an intended exploit or set of exploits, while on the bug bounty, you usually test a production environment or something that's going to be in production, and you don't really know if there are vulnerabilities. Sometimes you can know in advance some of the flaws, but that's an exception. I've participated in Capture the Flags in the past where there was a challenge called the Bug Bounty Challenge, and it was a real bug bounty. It was poorly implemented, and it was kind of a bug bounty without payouts. It was only free. You were you were given points on the competition. The thing is, it's not seen well accepted by the community to spend time on a bug bounty for free, because if that CTF didn't exist, that bug bounty would be listed on programs and would be more likely to be free. The only exception that I see probably is something I did 2 years ago, if I remember correctly. It was a bug bounty on the same CTF. The thing is, the program was, how can I call that? It was like Doctors Without Borders, not exactly this one, but it was another child protection, if I remember correctly. And this is fine by me because this program wouldn't have probably the money to pay for a fully fledged pen test or a bug bounty program, and finding that bug bounty into the Capture the Flag is fine by me. But there are ways to implement that, and in the past it was a bit difficult to see that correctly implemented.
Got it. And also, like, is there any strategies where participants can learn from before going to the CTFs?
Yes, in my opinion, there are two things to work on beforehand, which are the individual skills. So what you know, the challenges that you are going to be able to solve, or the categories that you feel confident in. But there is also one thing that many teams disregard in the team skills, the collective skills. I've seen many teams struggle with working together, whether it be on using the proper tools or the proper strategies, the proper methodology. For example, I've seen teams that realized in the middle of the Capture the Flag that 2 or 3 of the people were working on the same challenge. And they just realized it. They found the solution in 2 hours, submitted it, and found out that the team had already submitted the flag.
That's a waste of time.
Yeah, that's a really, exactly, that's a waste of time. I've seen people not communicate on the flags that they had, not communicate on the flags that they tried and were wrong. And some of the teammates were trying the exact same thing, wasting time and wasting sometimes you have limited tries. So first thing is to communicate. While it is easy to say, it's harder to do, because while you're doing for many hours a Capture the Flag, you're focused on in your own bubble. It's hard to think about, hey, let's inform the whole team that I'm working on this challenge. Let's inform that I found out how to solve it. Let's inform that I'm struggling with something. So one strategy would be, in my opinion, to set someone in the team to be like the captain, which one of the roles would be to regularly go through each and every individual and find out what they're doing, if they're struggling with something, if they need something, and make sure that the whole team is working as a team. It's sometimes, since people will not do it on their own, and it would be a mess if they do, having one person or two people that are doing this is, in my opinion, the correct way to go. And another advantage to this is for huge Capture the Flags where there are many challenges, or when there are many communication from the organizers, this captain would be also in charge of following up the messages, following up on the Discord server, for example, or finding out what are the challenges, what are the changes, the updates the fixes, whatever, and inform the team about it. But if every individual spends time on it, it's less time multiplied by the number of individuals in the team spent on technical challenges. So in my opinion, it's the best strategy would be beforehand work on the individual skills. If you already know what will be the theme and categories of the challenges, work on them. Find out what were the latest trends regarding those categories, if there were new web vulnerabilities, new crypto exploits, whatever. And then build team skills, find out the right tools to share notes, find out the right way to use your team Discord server, find one person in the team that will be responsible to following up what everyone is doing, following up on the organizers, on the challenge, on the Discord server, on the challenges themselves. Find out, for example, what are the categories of the challenge to maybe assign them. And sometimes challenges, it's written that it's crypto, but in fact, it's a crypto plus web, for example. And it could make sense to say, okay, Bob, you are an expert in crypto. Robert, you are an expert in web. You should probably work together on that challenge because that's the field that you master, and you are an expert in forensics. Let me check. Okay, there is a set of challenges on forensics. Finding someone that is in charge of all of this, work on the tools and work on the method that you use to inform that you have flagged, inform that you have tried something, inform the team, etc. Yeah, in my opinion.
Yeah, true. So before starting a CTF, a proper strategy should be maintained in order to complete those tasks. And apart from that, let's say an individual who's starting CTF. So before that, platforms like Try Hack Me, Hack the Box play an important role to know like how these vulnerabilities work. I started with Hack the Site. It was the first one that I started, and that's where I started writing blogs. And then I wanted to try a different platform. There were two platforms, Try Hack Me and Hack the Box. And Hack the Box, to log into that, you have to first hack it. So there are few steps that you have to take, whereas Try Hack Me was like you can just log in and you can work on it. So they were two pretty different platforms, but like concepts are same. But so I started with Try Hack Me since it was simple back then, and I started doing different labs. Wanted to create my own machine, so I started researching about it. And in YouTube channel, it was like a lot of Python code. Like it was like it's a very time taking process. So that's when I started, researching more about it, and I created my own OPM file and started, reconnaissance where I kept a few ports open, find the vulnerabilities, crack the code, the message, find admin, and that's where I started those machines. And also, I've seen you have created different modules in Hack the Box, right? So how did it started?
How it started is people from Hack the Box approached me a few years ago. I think it was 2 years ago or maybe 3 years ago. They reached out because they needed someone with good writing skills and good technical skills to write modules for people that wanted to get into that field and train themselves. And in the past, without those kind of modules and without blog posts that explain everything, if you wanted to find out how a technique or a set of technique worked, you needed to go through tens of websites, tens of blog posts. It was really painful, really time consuming, and it requires like a lot of research. And the fact that tens, hundreds, thousands of people are spending the same amount of time, wasting the same amount of time multiplied by the number of people is you quickly realize that a lot of people, like there is a lot of wasted time. So that's probably why they created Hack the Box Academy. That's why I created the HackerRecipes. That's why other people created iRed Team, Hack Tricks, and other resources, payload all the things, etc. So when they decided to do Hack the Box Academy, they needed to search to find people that were able to know what they were talking about and write about it in a way that beginners would understand. And I think they reached out to me because I was doing the HackerRecipes, and it was basically the same thing without the virtual labs, and they offer virtual labs as well. And the HackerRecipes doesn't go into that much detail. It's more of a synthesis, but I think that they saw the work that I did on the HackerRecipes and other community work, and they just said, all right, we think you are the right person for the job. Are you interested? I said, yes, I was just interested to find out exactly what they wanted, what was the time frame. But then we agreed on the time frame of on the categories, on the specifics, and yeah, we just started working together. It's been 2 years and maybe almost 3 years now, and we've probably made maybe 4 to 6 modules, something like that. And I think up to date there is the ACL abuse 1 and 2, NTLM relay.
ABCS attack?
Yes, probably. Yeah, exactly. And there are others that will be released in the coming months.
Yeah. So how much time will it take for a one module?
It's really hard to say because it
Mhm.
depends on the modules. It depends on the work that I did previously. For example, on the DACL abuse, I spent so much time understanding it and working on it on the hacker recipes that doing the module for Hack the Box was a bit faster. It
Yeah.
was not a couple of hours, of course. It took some time, but I didn't have to do all the background research because I had been doing that for the past 3 years or something, and
Yeah.
I spent great deal of time on that. To maybe give an idea, one model it could probably maybe 4 to 5 days, maybe something like that.
Yeah, maybe a week, I guess.
Yeah,
Tops.
probably. It's not a
Mhm.
full week, of course. It's like I'm maybe spending one weekend on it, and then one evening, and then the Saturday, and then the Saturday after that, and the module is good to go. I prepare the lab, I prepare the module, and then we ship it. I'm not the only one working on it. In the
Mhm.
past months, I've been working with a colleague of mine, and we could probably do that again in the future. So it really
Mhm.
helps to share the workload. But
Mhm.
yeah, it takes some time because if you want to have things written correctly for beginners
Yeah.
or people that didn't do the same amount of research that you did, you have to translate to a
Okay.
understandable technical
I
level and bring the
think
people from the beginning of the article to the end of the module. You have to translate less and less and hope that what you did is pulling people up and hopefully the level that they had in the beginning that required a lot of translation, they improved, and by the end of the module, they know what they do like you, and you don't need to translate anymore, you just share knowledge. So, yeah, that's basically the way
true.
we
I
write
agree.
things.
And also, like most of the modules, I think it was related to Active Directory. What Active Directory is?
Yeah, sure. When we're talking about Active Directory, we are usually referring to a subset of services called Active Directory domain services because Active Directory is a family of services that usually serve one purpose. Is broad purpose is to connect principals, users, groups with resources. That's basically it. When you have a huge company, you need people to be able to access certain resources. Some other people to not have access to those resources. Resources have access to other resources. People are a member of groups. Groups have some privileges, other groups don't, etc., etc. So you have all the identity and access management. Then you have services that allow to handle certificates, websites, SharePoint, file servers, whatever. And so when we are talking about Active Directory, we usually refer to ADDS, which is the set of services that are used by most companies in the world to handle users, groups, resources, machines, enrollment, etc. And ADDS usually knows how to work with ADCS, Active Directory Certificate Services, knows how to work with ADFS, ADSS, AD whatever, SharePoint, Exchange, but it's a set of services.
Great. Thanks for explaining that, Charlie. And are there any specific tools through which we can use pen testing on Active Directory?
Sure. First of all, it depends on your attacker environment. If you're attacking from a Windows host or if you're attacking from a Linux host. I'm doing everything on Linux, on
Mhm.
Exegol. So all tools like Rubius, PowerSploit, Mimikatz, I'm not using them because it only runs on Windows, except of course when I compromise a Windows machine and use that Windows machine. But when
Mhm.
I'm using my machine, I use three main types of tools. Could be the first type is let's say the Python tools and frameworks. So Impacket is really well known. It has a
Mhm.
lot. It's a combo hybrid library plus scripts, and you have many small tools into Impacket that you can use to create accounts, to modify permissions, to analyze delegations, etc., etc. Then you have NetExec, which is the new version of CrapMapExec, which relies on Impacket for many of its actions, but it's simplified and it's, let's say, a framework to do everything with the same tool. Then you have other tools like Certify to manipulate certificates from Python tools, etc., etc. There are many Python tools, hundreds of tools. Then one of the most well-known tools for Active Directory is Bloodhound, where you have the ability to enumerate the Active Directory through LDAP and other protocols to find out what are the relationships between users, groups, machines, groups, organizational units, GPOs, whatever. and then you can render that into Bloodhound and see graph relations between them. And this is something that legitimate Microsoft tools for Active Directory don't show. And if you want to enumerate the permissions of a user, for example, you have to go into that user, search for the permission other have on this user, or go on the permissions of a share and see what the permissions are, what permissions are set on that share. It's really time consuming. It's really painful to do. So Bloodhound gives a graph render of that, and you can easily say, okay, I compromised a standard user called, let's say, Bob, and I want to compromise domain admin privileges. Is a path that leads me to this kind of privileges. So that's really useful. And once you find out the path, if there is one, then you can use the tools at your disposal to operate each and every attack that leads to that. And then there is the third type of tools that I use for Active Directory assessments, which are not related to Active Directory directly, but more in the environment in which Active Directory runs, which is the network. So it could the two main ones are Responder and MITM6, Man in the Middle 6, to operate some network spoofing and poisoning network protocols that are used by Windows machines in the environment. And if you compromise one of those machines or force it to authenticate to yourself, etc., you can probably get initial access that will help you get that Bloodhound, find out the path, and then do your attacks until you compromise domain admin privileges.
Yeah, true. I think even like Bitcoin plays an important role. Like we can get a clear instructions. Like, okay, for example, if you want to, let's say compromise Alex, you have to go through Bob. We can escalate the privileges of Bob, and we can go to Alex. And, yeah, it's great tool.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Charlie. And also, like, if we go beyond that CTFs, so within an organization, they plan their own right within red teaming, blue teaming, and purple teaming. So how does these teams collaborate with each other within the organization?
You're zooming on the internal teams of a company, which is one example of where one could work into the cybersecurity field. There are other examples, but I will answer your question now. If you're working into the red team, your job is to attack, it's to emulate attackers. There is a general quiproquo whether red teamers and pen testers are doing the same job. In my definition, pen testing is an audit. It has to be in depth. It doesn't have to be stealthy. If you get detected, that's all right, because your job as a pen tester is to make an audit, and it's to find out as many vulnerabilities as possible to limit the risk as much as possible. While on the red team, in my opinion, your job is to emulate attackers, to find out what the security level is overall. If you get detected, that means that the blue team achieved its work. It also means that you got detected, so that's a fail. It's usually used for companies that had done pen tests in the past, that have increased their security level, and that now want two things. One, to find out how long they resist attackers, depending on the profile of attackers. And then, if their blue team is correct, has the right methodology, has the right tools, etc. And then to stimulate the blue team, because the blue team, and that's the other team, is in charge of the defense, to detect and to respond. In my opinion, need to be kept not on alert all day, but they need to know that there is a red team that is doing its job to emulate attackers trying to tirelessly access some high privileges. So it keeps the blue team active and invested into research, detection, and response and defense. And then there is the purple team, which is a hybrid team where you have red teamers that know how to attack. They find out vulnerabilities, and they usually either do the mitigation themselves or help defending. While on the classical red team, they don't do defense, and on the blue team, they don't do offense. And some companies realized that doing that is not the right call, because you're spending a lot of effort to attack, and maybe you're finding vulnerabilities that the blue team isn't aware of. That's a bummer. So the purple team, in my opinion, is probably the correct way to do it if they intend on emulating attackers sometimes in the year, and have the blue team not know about it, to make sure that the blue team has the right tools to detect what an attacker could do. Just an example, if you want to work in the cybersecurity field, you don't have to go into a client's red team, blue team, or purple team. You can go to other companies where your task as a consultant is to work for other companies to provide for audits, and many red teams and blue teams that I know are actually composed of people from other companies, from those IT services companies.
But yeah, like most of the people do that. And I think, as you said, red teaming is like attacking, blue is like defending, and maybe purple team will be filling the gaps between these two teams. So even in my previous company, I think back in like maybe 3-4 years ago, I was given a task of red teaming. So parallel, I was doing Go language where I was creating APIs, and I was also doing a part of red teaming. They were giving me tools, for example, Pineapple at that time, and I have to compromise those particular systems. So I was trying different techniques and tools, and also learning programming at that time. So it was quite interesting. And also, like as you previously mentioned about contractors, like what do you think, is compared to job, is contracting a better or freelance? Like, what do you think about freelancing?
There are different jobs. It depends on what you want. Because in the end, you are doing the job. So there's not
Yeah.
one thing that is better than another. It depends on you. If you want to discover many things and have more diversity in your daily job, working for a contractor may be a good idea. If you want to see projects from A to Z and get to know the processes, a company, get to know the colleagues you're working with, get to know the environment you're working in, have some time to really deep dive on some things that you really sometimes you don't have that time when you work for a contractor. Working for clients, for a company, for its internal team could be a good idea. And then if you are autonomous, you want to be more free, let's say, because you don't want to depend on a manager. You want to find your own engagements on your own. You could be freelance. That could be a way for some to win more money. I mean, that's one of the motivations of some freelance, but it's not the main one. It's also to choose the people that you're working with, to choose the client you're
Yeah.
working with. If by the end of the year you know that you're gonna be paid the right amount, you can choose, and that's a luxury, and that's a luxury you usually cannot have when you're working for a contractor or into an internal team for a client. Some contractors know how to do this by only filtering out bad engagements, but in the end, if they have a rough year, they will accept the bad engagements. While if you are working as a freelance for your own, that's your choice. That's your responsibility. If you are having a rough year and still don't want to accept bad engagements, I mean, that's your call. And no one's going to do it for you. You really feel free when you're doing that. And that's your responsibility. You are responsible of everything you do. Yeah, it's different formats for different people. Depends on what you do, on what you want to do. If you want to train and spend many hours on diverse stuff and don't want to take care of finding the clients, doing the contracts, handling the lawyer or budgeting or whatever, contractor. If you want to spend really some time into a same environment, get to know it, go deep dive into the protocols, probably the best way to go client. If you want to be more free, probably win some more money in that field, or maybe take your risks and be responsible of yourself, freelance.
Yeah, and even I think coming to freelance, I think as an initial stage, getting the gigs is like quite difficult, right?
It's part of the risks. If you want to get freelance, you have to find those clients. There are some platforms that allow you to be visible, like Fiverr, for example. I don't know if
Yeah.
Fiverr is the right platform to go to as a penetration tester. It's usually for more creative stuff, but I mean that's just an example. Some platforms could probably help you, and then it's a matter of networking. If you know the clients that you want to be working with, or if you don't, if you know people in the community, the community sometimes shares good engagements. That's, in my opinion, a matter of networking. If you're bad at networking, don't want to do it, going freelance is probably high risk, because while there's never a guarantee that you will find engagements, if you don't want to do networking, there is a higher chance you will not get one.
True, true. I do agree. Networking plays an important role, finding the clients.
Yeah.
And, even because like even in like freelancing, you have to have the ratings, right? If you have people give a lot of ratings, then you have a higher chance of getting good gigs again.
Yeah, but then you have to get people go into that and go into
Yeah,
your website and find
true.
those ratings. If no one knows you,
There you go.
you could have good ratings, but no one will look for them. No one will read those ratings because no one is looking for you. So it's a balance of getting known, doing some networking, and also, as you said, the most important stuff is producing high quality work, because I know people that are more focused on getting famous or known or whatever, but the work they do or the ethics they have is not on the level. So people know them but don't want to work with them. So it's a matter of balance. You have to find those clients. You have to make sure clients can find you if they have needs, maybe work on your SEO, marketing, whatever. But then the most important, to make sure that the work you provide is good. Because if you don't, pretty rapidly, especially if you're famous or known, it will be publicly known that what you're doing is bad. It's like you don't want that.
Yeah, do agree. So, and also like you have been a speaker for more than 20 conferences, right? How was that experience? Like giving as a speaker.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because sometimes people assume that when you're doing some conferences, that's awesome because you're traveling, you're discovering so many things. It is sometimes, but it's a lot of work because you're going to be speaking in front of a lot of people. So you want to make sure that you're not saying random things. You want to make sure that you're not presenting yourself as a fool. Or so you have to work on your topic. You have to submit your topic to the organizers. You have to cross fingers that they accept it because they think it brings value to their event, to the people that go there. So it's a long process. It takes time. It's also a risk because you're exposing yourself. You're in front of a lot of people, sharing what you know. And while it's a good thing, it's never a bad thing to share what you know and try to help others. Some people are usually not that patient, or they want to prove you wrong for some reason. And while you could be wrong, of course, there are ways to say it. And sometimes it's a bit rough. And you know, when you're doing things like this, when you're getting public, that people are saying things behind your back, either because it's for jealous reasons or because you're just saying wrong things. But it's getting harder because you know that there are people that like what you do and that there are people that don't. And when you're not public, there are less people that don't like what you do or like what you do. So it's easier to handle that. It's easier to accept. And by doing conferences like this on a regular basis, I know that there are people that don't like what I do. I don't like me, even if I don't know them personally. I've never met them, but it's the job. So the experience that I get from that is really, really interesting because it helps me spend some time on technical matters. It was a way for me to really improve on technical fields. So it was huge on that end. It was an awesome way to get skilled. It was a nice way for me. I wanted that to share with the community what I knew, because everything we do in our day-to-day basis into the cybersecurity field relies work from the community. So I wanted to give back to the community in the way I could. And then, of course, it's also a way to meet new people, to meet companies, to see other countries. But rest assured, when you're doing that, one, you're not paid. When you're doing conferences like this, it's not my job. I'm not a professional speaker. I would consider myself as a professional speaker if I was paid for this, but I'm not. So it's time that I'm not spending on paid stuff. Sometimes you're reimbursed the travel expenses. That's sometimes. In the 25 talks that I did, I probably was reimbursed maybe 5 or 6 times. And on the other ones, it was either my personal money or I was trying to have my company finance it. And also, you don't travel in business class. You're like, when you are at a new city for a conference, it was last year, if I remember correctly, I went to Las Vegas, I went to Singapore, I went to Montreal, I went to Switzerland, the year before that to London, to many places. But when you go there, you're not staying there for a month, you know? You're going there for the event. You want to prepare for the event. You don't have that much time to get around and just do some sightseeing, and you're not eating at all-inclusive buffet and you're not traveling in business. I mean, so in time it gets a bit tiring because from the jet lags, sorry, plus the lack of comfort, plus the fact that you're not home, that you're a lot on the move and you're working endlessly on your talk, want to do qualitative stuff. I mean, at one point it gets exhausting. So yeah, it was a really nice experience. I will continue to do that, but probably in a less intense way, because the more you do it, the more you find out people are not liking what you do for reasons that they don't even know. The more that you get far from home, you get tired, you also feel like your social battery is exhausting.
Yeah.
Like it's getting empty really quickly when you're like spending, I don't know, 1 week every day speaking in English with people you don't know, building like network and getting into communities. That's a really nice thing to do. But I mean, on the second, at the end of the second day, you're just tired. You want to go home.
Yeah.
You're tired of speaking a language that you're not native on. It's really tiring. So there was good and bad to take from
Yeah.
those experiences. Mainly good, of course, but people have to get out this idea that you're living the luxury life, that you are spending all your time on a beach or whatever. You're not paid for that. You usually have to pay for the expenses. Like it's not comfortable situations living in the hotel or whatever. So I'm glad I didn't spend my whole year doing that. But still, doing some like 5 to 6 events in 1 year is a lot. You have to prepare for that. You have to work on that, and all of this
So
is free work. So yeah, it's exhausting.
yeah, it's a lot of preparation, and even going to such conferences, it builds our confidence. Like,
But
when speaking to a larger
there are
audience.
good
Yeah.
things to take from that because you meet a lot of people, you meet companies, you of course by sharing your work, you invite other people to come back to you with recommendation or I mean to say what you said on that slide is not exactly true because I found out that blah blah blah. So it's a really nice way to increase your technical skills and expose yourself, get public, and the fact that you're probably going to say one or two mistakes, but if you hadn't done that talk, you probably wouldn't find out that you had a mistake in your head. But by
Sorry.
sharing it, by sharing what you know that there are people that will get out of the conference with more things in their head and you have helped them. So that's a good thing. But also, if there are things that you should know, people will probably come back to you and tell you those things that you don't know. There are many, many good things to take
Yeah.
from such experiences.
Thanks for sharing that, Charlie. And like, can you share something about the hacker recipes and Exegol?
Yeah, sure. Those two are two of the projects that I started when I started into the cybersecurity field. As I said earlier, there are a lot of um, our job relies a lot on community work. There are hundreds of tools that you use that are open source, free, made by the community. And while they don't last many years because they are free and open source, at the time you are doing your pen test, you are probably relying on 90% community stuff. So it was important for me to give back in the way I could. And when I started working into Active Directory, for example, I found out, as I said earlier, that when you research a technique, you're looking for tens of websites, trying to aggregate the information, synthesize it, understand it. And I realized that if you multiply the time that I wasted by the number of people that waste that time, there's something to do about it. So that's why I started the Hacker Recipes to have a centralized set of theoretical and practical guides that you can trust because they have not been copy pasted from random resources. They have been written from the ground up, verified, tested. So that's trustable. That's trustworthy. So that's why I started this, and since then, many people started contributing to it. And I hope that in the future we find a way to maybe pay for contributors, pay for writers, make sure that it becomes a broad initiative where people know, like Wikipedia, they know that they can
Yeah.
go to that, contribute to that, and profit from that resource to get better at doing the job. And then Exegol, it's the same mindset. It's just that I was doing one day a pen test for a client using Kali Linux. I was frustrated a lot with that operating system because it's not really stable. You're doing your pen test on one environment that always changes with your pen test. It's not stable. It's not secure. It's not the right way to go. It's not, if clients knew that, they probably wouldn't hire you because that's not professional. You would probably need secure, separate environments for each engagement that you could destroy at the end of the engagement. That's security, that's confidentiality, that's professionality, that's the ethical way to do. That's you have the ability to maybe log what you do to make sure that you are transparent with the clients. And those things I didn't get from Kali Linux. And one day at a client's, I messed up my operating system and it was too much. I said, okay, stop. I
Just straight
spent the
one.
whole night at the hotel to build the operating system again, to make the right configurations, to back up the data that I had lost. I spent the whole night on it, and the morning after I was like, never again. Never again am I doing that. So I started using Docker to find out a
Mm-hmm.
way to start having something that could be installed quickly. And then it became what it is today, which is a sort of ecosystem relying on Docker and Python to make sure that your host stays your host. It's you don't have to have those security tools inside your host, but you have Docker images that you can easily deploy because of a Python wrapper. You don't have to be an expert at Docker, and you can have separate secure containers for each engagement. You can prove to your client that you delete this environment. You
Mm-hmm.
can get easily logs for your inputs and your outputs, and that's easy. You can have some graphical sharing. You can open graphical windows just like a virtual machine, but it's not as heavy as a virtual machine. It's way more. The performance is better.
Mm-hmm.
It's Kali Linux, but with the right choice of tools, with more up-to-date installs, with a community. It's open source. If you want to add a new tool, you can ask for it, or you can even add it yourself, and we can review and merge. Or you can even add it yourself on your own local installation, and make sure that every new container that you create has your own private tool. So it's really the Kali Linux, but for professionals. In my opinion, Kali Linux is good to train and to get started into this. But once you're tired with always redeploying your Kali Linux, or when you're doing an
Mm-hmm.
update, it breaks everything, or when you're doing an update, you realize that the tools that you have are outdated by a year, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where you try to move on to something else. And when you see the choice that you have from Parrot to Black Arc to whatever, they are all monolithic systems. They are all operating systems. And if you
Mm-hmm.
want to work professionally with separate environments, that's where you realize that you have the choice between the virtual machines that are clunky, that are heavy, it's not performant. That's where you move on to Exegol because it uses the right tools. Yeah, that's why I started this, and nowadays we have thousands of people using it. We have presented it to Black Hat London in 2022, Black Hat Singapore, and Las Vegas in 2023, and yeah, we now have a huge community behind it, and I mean, we love working on it, and we love using it. I've not started Kali Linux since maybe 2020, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
real pleasure.
Congrats on that, like you created
Yeah,
Exegol, and
I'm
good,
not the
good.
only one. Of course, there are people that
Yeah, I do agree.
have
I
me
think it's a
on
part of
it. There is Drumlak,
the.
which is the lead developer on the project that has
Mhm.
brought his knowledge, and he had an experience in development, so he knew what I couldn't develop. And now there is a community behind it. We have moderators on the Discord community. We have people that help each other when there is something wrong with the way they use the tool or with techniques that they are trying to do. And that's
Mhm.
really what we wanted to achieve. We with the HackerRecipes plus Exegol, you have the knowledge, you know how to do it, why, you have the tools to do it, and you have the community behind it. So that's what I wanted to provide, and I was lucky enough to have those projects develop and find their communities. So yeah, I'm glad that we achieved that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Charlie. So we are in the end of the podcast. So is there any life lesson or suggestions that you want to give to our audience?
Yeah, sure. There is one thing I have in mind is when you want to achieve something, there are many people, especially in our industry, that feel like they have to get the perfect product or idea before launching it. And if I
Mhm.
have learned something, it's that it will never be perfect. And if you wait for it to be perfect, you will never start it. So my opinion, my advice is to get started as soon as possible. If your idea is good, if your motivations are good, you will at one point improve on it. And if you don't, it probably means that you didn't have the right motivations, or it was not the good idea. But starting it early, make sure that you don't invest too much time on it because maybe it will be useless or maybe it's something that it does already exist. But yeah, start early and develop while it's living its life. That's my advice. It's good for products. It's good for services. It's a way of life. If you want to do something with your life, if
Got it.
you expect it to be perfect before you start it, you will never start it.
Thanks for your session,
Sure.
Charlie. So yeah, this is the end of the podcast. And if you've not subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe to my channel and please share the video. Thanks, everyone.